I stared at the phone in my hand, sleek, black, definitely not mine. The screen lit up with another message, "Missing you already, baby." My stomach twisted as I scrolled through dozens of similar texts. Each one a dagger to my gut. "I'm Gracie, and 5 minutes ago, I was just doing laundry. Checking pockets before tossing David's jacket in the wash, a habit from when Eli was little and would stuff rocks and half-eaten candies in his coat. Now my 6-year-old knows better than his father. Mommy, can we have pizza tonight?" Eli's voice floated down from upstairs, innocent and clear. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Sure, sweetie. Just give me a minute." Amazing how steady my voice sounded while my world cracked apart. The messages went back months. Pictures, too, nothing explicit, thank God, but enough to tell the story. Dinner dates. Stolen kisses. Weekend getaways when David said he was at business conferences. Her name was Rachel. She had a dimple in her right cheek and wore too much mascara. "Is Daddy coming home for dinner?" Eli appeared at the bottom of the stairs, clutching his favorite dinosaur. I shoved the phone into my pocket. "Not tonight, baby. He's working late." Another lie to add to the pile David had been building. He's always working late now. Eli's lower lip trembled slightly. "Come here." I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of apple shampoo and fruit snacks. "How about we make that pizza ourselves? With extra cheese?" His face brightened. "Can I put pepperoni in the shape of a T-Rex?" "Absolutely." I forced a smile, already calculating my next move. The phone in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. While Eli arranged his prehistoric pepperoni masterpiece, I sent myself screenshots of every damning conversation. My hands shook, but I managed to reset the phone to factory settings before slipping it back into David's jacket pocket. He wouldn't know I'd seen it. Not yet. "Look, Mommy. It's roaring." Eli pointed proudly at his creation. "That's amazing, sweetie." I ruffled his hair, remembering how David used to do the same thing. How many other habits and gestures had he shared with her? The front door opened at 7:30. David's footsteps in the hallway, his briefcase hitting the floor with a thud. I'd heard this sound thousands of times before, but tonight it made my skin crawl. "Something smells good." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, all perfect smile and loosened tie. "We made pizza." Eli launched himself at his father. "Look, it's a T-Rex." "Wow, buddy, that's incredible." David scooped him up, and for a moment, I saw the man I married, the one who used to spend hours building blanket forts and reading bedtime stories. What happened to him? "How was work?" I asked, my voice honey-sweet with poison. "Busy. That merger's killing me." He didn't meet my eyes, already setting Eli down and heading for the stairs. "I need a shower." I watched him go, thinking about the message from Rachel timestamped 2 hours ago. Lunch was perfect. Can't wait until next time. The pizza tasted like cardboard in my mouth, but I smiled through dinner, laughed at Eli's jokes, and pretended everything was normal. Later, after tucking Eli in, I sat in the dark of his room, watching his chest rise and fall. "Gracie?" David's whisper, from the doorway. "Coming to bed?" I turned to look at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "In a minute." He nodded and disappeared, probably already reaching for his secret phone to message her goodnight. I stayed there, in the dark, planning. David thought he was so clever with his hidden phone and careful lies. He had no idea what was coming. Because while he'd been busy destroying our family, he'd forgotten one crucial thing: I'd always been smarter than him. The coffee shop buzzed with weekend crowds, but Samantha's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "You need to nail the bastard to the wall." I traced the rim of my untouched latte, the screenshots from David's phone burning a hole in my pocket. It's not that simple. There's Eli to think about. Exactly why you can't let David get away with this. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes fierce. What kind of example does it set if? My phone lit up with David's message, taking Eli to the zoo today. Don't wait up. He's doing it again, I said, showing her the screen. Making plans without asking, probably meeting her there. The zoo? Samantha's eyebrows shot up. Isn't that where you had your first date? The memory hit like a punch to the gut. David, younger and earnest, buying me cotton candy and telling terrible jokes about the penguins. Now he was probably doing the same routine with Rachel, recycling our history like used furniture. I'm going, I announced, grabbing my purse. I need to see for myself. Gracie, wait, but I was already heading for the door. The zoo parking lot was packed. I spotted David's car easily, the silver BMW he'd insisted on buying last year, another warning sign I'd missed. I parked far enough away and waited. 20 minutes later, they emerged. David held Eli's hand, and Rachel walked on his other side, her fingers brushing against his arm. They looked like a perfect little family, and bile rose in my throat. Look, Daddy. Eli pointed at something, bouncing with excitement. Rachel laughed, touching David's shoulder with casual intimacy. My phone buzzed. Samantha, don't do anything crazy. Think of Eli. I watched them disappear into the crowd, my hands shaking as I typed a response. Too late. That evening, David brought home a tired but happy Eli, who clutched a stuffed penguin. Mommy, we saw lions. And penguins. Anne. That's wonderful, sweetie. I kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of sugar and excitement. Why don't you go get ready for bath time? David lingered in the kitchen, loosening his tie. He had a great time today. I'm sure he did. I kept my voice neutral, loading dishes into the dishwasher. The zoo's always been special, hasn't it? He paused, something flickering across his face. What do you mean? Nothing. I smiled, all teeth. Just remembering our first date there. The cotton candy, the penguin jokes. You still tell those? The color drained from his face. Gracie. Daddy. Eli called from upstairs. Can you read me a story? David hesitated, looking between me and the stairs. We should talk. Should we? Seems like you've been doing plenty of talking with someone else. I turned away, my hand steady as I wiped the counter. Better not keep Eli waiting. He's had such a special day with his daddy. Later, after Eli was asleep, David found me in the living room. About today. Save it. I stood up, gathering the scattered toys. I have a meeting with my lawyer tomorrow. Lawyer? His voice cracked. Why would you? To discuss my options. I met his eyes. Unless you'd like to tell me about Rachel now? He stumbled backward, like I'd struck him. How did you? Does it matter? I moved past him, toward the stairs. By the way, you should be more careful with your phones. Both of them. Wait, please, he grabbed my arm. We can work this out. For Eli's sake. I jerked away. Don't you dare use our son as a shield. Not after parading your girlfriend around him at the zoo. She's not, it's not what you think. No? I pulled out my phone, showing him the screenshots. Then explain these. Actually, don't bother. Save it for the lawyer. I left him standing there, mouth open, excuses dying on his lips. Upstairs, I checked on Eli, his new penguin clutched tight against his chest. The sight of it made my heart ache, but it also strengthened my resolve. David thought he could rewrite our history, replace me in our family's story. But he'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just a character he could write out. I was the author of my own revenge, and his chapter was about to end. The restaurant's warm lighting couldn't soften Rachel's sharp features as she stirred her untouched coffee. I don't understand. Who did you say you were again? Gracie Thompson. My voice stayed steady, despite the rage bubbling beneath my skin. David's wife. The color drained from her face. Wife. But he said, she stopped, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling around her cup. Let me guess. He told you we were separated? Getting divorced? I pulled out my phone, sliding it across the table. Here's Eli's birthday party from 2 months ago. Notice how happy Daddy looks, blowing out the candles with our son? Rachel stared at the photo, her mascara-heavy lashes blinking rapidly. He said Eli was his nephew. That hit harder than I expected. David hadn't just erased me, he'd denied his own son. Interesting. Was that before or after he took you to the zoo? To our spot? I need to go. She grabbed her purse, but I caught her wrist. Sit down, Rachel. We're not finished. She sank back into her chair, mascara smudging as tears formed. I didn't know. You have to believe me. Oh, I believe you. I released her wrist. David's good at lying. To everyone. My phone buzzed, David's face appearing on screen. I showed it to Rachel. Want to answer it? She shook her head, wiping her eyes. How long have you known? Long enough to gather evidence. Bank statements, hotel receipts, photos. I leaned forward. Tell me, does your company know you've been sleeping with a board member? Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. Try me. The coffee between us had gone cold, like the space where my heart used to be. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end it. Today. And then you're going to write down everything, dates, places, conversations. Every lie he told you, every promise he made. Why would I help you? Because if you don't, the board gets an anonymous tip about your relationship. Your career versus his marriage seems like an easy choice. Rachel's lips trembled. He said he loved me. He said that to me too, right before he took our son to the zoo with his girlfriend. I stood up, dropping cash on the table. You have until tomorrow. And Rachel? He has a tell when he's lying, that little smile, right before he feeds you the perfect line you want to hear. Watch for it next time. Outside, my phone buzzed again. David's message, where are you? We need to talk. I typed back, yes, we do. Bring your other phone. The drive home felt surreal, like I was watching someone else navigate through traffic. David's car was already in the driveway when I arrived. Through the window, I could see him pacing in the kitchen. My phone lit up one last time. Rachel, I'll tell you everything. I walked into my house, our house, where family photos still hung on the walls like artifacts from another life. David spun around, his face pale. Where were you? He demanded. Having coffee with Rachel. I watched the blood drain from his face. She says hello. He stumbled back against the counter. Gracie, please. Save it. I pulled out a manila envelope. Inside are divorce papers, a custody agreement, and copies of everything I have on you and Rachel. Sign them all, and this stays private. Fight me, and everyone finds out, your parents, your boss, everyone. You're blackmailing me? No, David. I'm giving you what you wanted, freedom to be with Rachel. Oh wait, I checked my phone, showing him Rachel's message, maybe not anymore. He lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Don't. You've taken enough from me. What about Eli? His voice cracked. He needs his father. You should have thought about that before you made him your fictional nephew. I headed for the stairs, leaving the envelope on the counter. You have until tomorrow to sign. After that, I stopped being nice. Gracie, he called after me. I'm sorry. I paused on the stairs, not turning around. No, you're sorry you got caught. But don't worry, I'm just getting started. Linda's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. I found these in Paul's study. She slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table. David's been planning this for months. Bank statements. Investment accounts. Property deeds. All carefully hidden, all moved into offshore accounts. My stomach lurched as I saw the dates. The first transfer was made the day after Eli's birthday party. There's more, Linda whispered, glancing toward the doorway as if Paul might appear. He's been interviewing for positions in Chicago. The room tilted sideways. Chicago? Paul overheard him on the phone. He's already accepted an offer. Linda reached for my hand. He can't take Eli, Gracie. I won't let him. I pulled away, pacing the sunlit kitchen where I'd spent countless holidays with this family. Why are you showing me this? Because I failed my own daughter 30 years ago. Linda's voice cracked. I watched Paul destroy her in their divorce, take everything, including my grandchildren. I won't watch it happen again. A car door slammed outside, Paul's distinctive heavy footsteps on the porch. Linda snatched the papers, stuffing them into my bag. Thursday nights, he plays bridge. The safe combination is Eli's birthday. Paul burst in, his presence filling the room. Well, if it isn't my favorite daughter-in-law. Finally come to talk some sense into that boy of mine? I forced a smile, shouldering my bag. Just catching up with Linda. Good, good. He kissed Linda's cheek, but I caught her slight flinch. David tells me you're being difficult about the divorce. Think of Eli. I am thinking of Eli. My voice could have frozen hell. Every second of every day. Back home, I spread the papers across my desk, piecing together David's plan. The bastard had been methodically hiding money since before Rachel, preparing his escape route while playing the devoted father. My phone buzzed. David, taking Eli to dinner. Don't wait up. My fingers flew across the keyboard. No. Excuse me? You heard me. No more spontaneous dinners. No more surprise trips. You want to see your son? Go through my lawyer. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you can't do this. Watch me. I called Samantha, my voice steady, despite the rage burning through my veins. I need your help. Bring your camera. That night, while David was working late, we followed him to an upscale realtor's office. Through the window, I watched him shake hands with a woman in a power suit, accepting a folder labeled Chicago Properties. Got it? I asked Samantha, who nodded, reviewing the photos on her camera. Every sleazy second. She squeezed my arm. What's your play? I thought of Linda's haunted eyes, of Paul's casual dominance, of all the carefully hidden papers. I'm going nuclear. The next morning, I walked into David's office building, straight past security, my heels clicking against marble floors. His secretary's eyes widened as I approached. Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is in a meeting. I pushed open his office door. David sat with 3 board members, mid-presentation. Honey. His fake smile appeared. This isn't a good time. Actually, it's perfect. I dropped a thick folder on the conference table. Since everyone's here, we can discuss your plans for Chicago. And these offshore accounts. Oh, and let's not forget Rachel from marketing. The blood drained from his face as the board members reached for the documents. Gracie, please. I particularly enjoyed the part where you planned to take our son across state lines without my knowledge. I turned to the shocked executives. Gentlemen, you'll find copies of everything in there, including proof of funds misappropriation. I've already sent duplicates to the SEC. This is a private matter, David sputtered. Not anymore. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at the wreckage of his career. By the way, Linda says hello. Funny how karma works, isn't it? In the elevator, my phone lit up with messages from David, each more desperate than the last. I deleted them all, thinking of Linda's words, I won't watch it happen again. Neither would I. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast a sickly glow over Eli's pale face. His small hand burned with fever in mine as the doctor rattled off terms like severe pneumonia and immediate treatment. Where's your husband? The nurse's innocent question felt like acid in my throat. He's coming. Another lie to add to the growing pile. David's phone went straight to voicemail, all 5 times I'd called. Samantha arrived first, bringing coffee and a change of clothes. Any word from him? I showed her my phone, a text from Rachel sent an hour ago, having dinner with David. He seems stressed. Everything okay? I'll kill him, Samantha whispered, watching Eli's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. Not if I get to him first. The night crawled by. Eli's fever spiked at midnight, bringing a flurry of medical staff and more medication. Through it all, David's absence echoed like a scream in an empty room. At 3 a.m., my phone lit up, David's face appearing on screen. Where are you? Just got your messages. Mount Sinai Hospital. Emergency room. My voice could have frozen hell. Your son's been here for 8 hours with pneumonia. Silence. Then, I was in a meeting. At Lou Bernardine? With Rachel? I watched Eli's oxygen levels on the monitor. Hope the wine was worth it. That's not fair. Room 412. Show up or don't. Either way, you've made your choice. He arrived 30 minutes later, still wearing his dinner suit, reeking of expensive wine. How is he? Now you care? I stood between him and Eli's bed. Where were you when he couldn't breathe? When they had to hold him down for the 4? I made a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This? I gestured to our sick child. This is who you are now. Eli stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Daddy? David moved toward the bed, but I grabbed his arm. If you go to him now, smelling like her perfume, we're done. No lawyers, no negotiations. I'll burn everything down, your career, your reputation, everything. He stepped back, pain flashing across his face. You can't keep me from my son. Watch me. I turned away, focusing on Eli. Go back to sleep, sweetie. Daddy was just leaving. The door clicked shut behind him. Eli's monitor beeped steadily as tears slid down his fevered cheeks. Why doesn't Daddy want to stay? My heart shattered into a million pieces. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, baby. But I promise, I'm not going anywhere. Morning brought Linda, carrying fresh clothes and righteous anger. Paul's furious. He's threatening to cut David off completely. Good. I watched Eli sleep, his breathing finally easier. Did you know they were at Lou Bernardine last night? While Eli was here? Linda's face hardened. That restaurant was where Paul proposed to me. David's recycling all our family memories with her. My phone buzzed. David again, we need to talk. About everything. Yes, I typed back, we do. I hope she was worth losing your son over. Linda squeezed my hand. What will you do now? I thought about the offshore accounts, the Chicago plans, the missed calls while our son struggled to breathe. Everything you wished you'd done 30 years ago. He'll fight back, she warned. Let him. I stroked Eli's hair, feeling his fever finally breaking. He chose his battlefield when he left our son alone in this hospital. The morning sun crept through the window, painting Eli's face in gold. In the quiet, watching him breathe, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about hurting David anymore. It was about protecting what he'd thrown away, this precious life he'd deemed less important than a dinner date. My phone lit up one last time. Rachel, David told me about Eli. I'm so sorry. I never meant. I deleted the message without reading further. Sorry wouldn't erase Eli's tears or heal his fever. Sorry wouldn't undo David's choices. But justice might. The conference room at David's law firm felt like a tomb. 8 pairs of eyes watched me set up my laptop, including David's, bloodshot and desperate. Rachel sat at the far end, mascara smeared from crying. Perfect. Mrs. Thompson, the managing partner, cleared his throat. You claim to have evidence of financial misconduct? I clicked through the first slides, bank transfers, property documents, all bearing David's signature. My husband has been systematically hiding assets for months, preparing to flee the state with our son. David's chair scraped against hardwood. That's not. Sit down. Paul's voice cracked like a whip. He'd insisted on attending, despite David's protests. Let her finish. The next slide showed text messages, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. Rachel's soft sobbing provided the perfect soundtrack to David's downfall. While embezzling company funds, I continued, he was also carrying on an affair with Rachel Miller from marketing. Using company resources to finance their relationship. You vindictive bitch, David snarled, mask finally slipping. You think this makes you noble? Destroying everything just to hurt me? I met his eyes. No, what makes me noble is that I waited until Eli was released from the hospital before doing this. Something about basic human decency you wouldn't understand. The managing partner raised his hand. These offshore accounts were set up the day after our son's birthday party. I played the final card. The same day David accepted a position with your Chicago competitors. I have those emails too. The room erupted. Partners shouting, Rachel fleeing in tears, Paul's face purple with rage. Through it all, David stared at me, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. You've ruined everything, he whispered. No, you did that yourself. Security arrived to escort David out. I packed my laptop, hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Victory tasted like ashes. The parking garage was dark when I left. My footsteps echoed between concrete pillars, keys clutched like weapons. Feel better now? David emerged from behind a column, tie loose, eyes wild. Proud of yourself? Stay back. I reached for my phone. Or what? You'll destroy me again? He laughed, harsh and broken. There's nothing left to take. There's Eli. Wrong thing to say. David lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You won't keep my son from me. Let go. I twisted away, but his fingers dug deeper. I gave you everything. His voice echoed off concrete walls. The house, the lifestyle, all of it. And this is how you repay me? You gave me lies. I wrenched free, stumbling backward. You gave me betrayal and empty promises while planning your escape. I loved you. He swung wildly, fist connecting with the pillar beside my head. No, I whispered, you loved yourself. Security cameras caught everything, his rage, my fear, the moment he nearly crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Tomorrow, those videos would reach the judge handling our custody case. Another nail in David's coffin. But tonight, sitting in my car with shaking hands, victory felt hollow. Eli's voice echoed in my head, why doesn't Daddy want to stay? My phone lit up, Linda, Paul's disowning him. It's done. Then Rachel, I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. Finally, Samantha, Eli's asking for his father. I stared at the messages through blurring tears. I'd won, destroyed David's career, exposed his lies, secured Eli's future. So why did it feel like I'd lost something too? The garage's shadow stretched like prison bars across my windshield. Somewhere above, David was probably clearing out his office, his carefully constructed life crumbling around him. Just like I'd planned. But revenge, I was learning, was like a double-edged sword. In cutting him down, I'd drawn my own blood too. And somewhere in this wreckage, our 6-year-old son still waited for his father to come home. I started the car, hands steady now. One last text arrived, David, you'll regret this. Maybe. But I'd regret letting him hurt Eli more. Sometimes victory tastes like ashes, but ashes make fertile ground for new beginnings. Paul's study felt smaller than I remembered, the leather and mahogany closing in like a trap. David sat across from his father's desk, shoulders slumped, while Paul paced behind him. You're not just a disappointment, Paul's voice cut through the silence. You're a disgrace to this family. I hadn't planned to be here for this, but Linda had insisted. He needs to see what he's lost, she'd whispered, squeezing my hand. I can explain, David started. Explain what? Paul slammed a folder onto the desk. How you embezzled from your firm? Betrayed your wife? Abandoned your sick child? Each accusation landed like a physical blow. David's fingers twitched toward the crystal decanter on the side table, another inherited habit, another weakness exposed. Or explain how you planned to steal your son away to Chicago. I added quietly. Using money from your father's trust fund? David's head snapped up. You told them about that too? No, son. Paul's laugh was bitter. Your mother found the paperwork months ago. We've been watching you destroy yourself ever since. Linda stepped forward from her corner. We thought you'd come to your senses. Choose your family. Like you did, Mom? David's voice dripped venom. Standing in the corner while Dad runs everything? Is that what family means? Don't you dare, Paul growled, but Linda raised her hand. No, let him speak. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Let him explain why he's following your example, Paul. The affairs, the secrets, the controlling everything through money. The room froze. Paul's face went from red to white. Linda. The difference is, she continued, I stayed silent to protect our children. Gracie spoke up to protect hers. David laughed, harsh and hollow. Protect him? She's destroying his life. No, I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. You did that when you chose Rachel over his hospital bed. When you planned to tear him away from everything he knows. I love my son. You love yourself more. He lunged forward, but Paul caught his arm. Enough. Let him go, I said quietly. Let him show Eli exactly who his father is. David wrenched free, breathing hard. You've taken everything. My job, my reputation. Your offshore accounts? Paul interrupted. The trust fund? Yes, those are gone too. As of this morning, everything's been transferred to an education trust for Eli. The color drained from David's face. You can't. I can and I did. Paul sat heavily behind his desk. It's what your grandfather would have wanted. Family money for family values. Then I'll fight it, David snarled. All of it. The divorce, custody, everything. With what? Linda's voice was almost gentle. Your firm's partners are cooperating with the SEC. Rachel's given a full statement. Even your Chicago position's been withdrawn. I watched the reality sink in, watched David's carefully constructed world crumble, completely. In that moment, he looked startlingly like the man I'd married, lost, vulnerable, human. I never meant, he whispered. I know. And suddenly, I did. You never meant for any of this. Just like you never meant to miss Eli's hospital stay, or hurt me, or become your father. Paul flinched. Linda reached for his hand. But you did. I moved toward the door. And now you have to live with it. Gracie, please, David's voice cracked. I'll lose everything. No, I turned back one last time. You'll lose what you took for granted. There's a difference. Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of ending. My phone buzzed. Samantha, Eli's asking when you'll be home. Home. Not the house we'd shared with David, but the small apartment where Eli and I were building something new. Something honest. It's done, I texted back. On my way. Behind me, I could hear David's muffled sobs through the study door, mixed with Paul's stern voice and Linda's softer tones. The sound should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like closure. Like turning the final page of a story that had run its course. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Sometimes it's about saving yourself. The moving boxes made our new apartment feel smaller, but Eli's laughter filled every corner as he arranged his dinosaurs on the windowsill. Each plastic figure faced east, toward the sunrise, he insisted, just like real dinosaurs would have done. My phone buzzed with a text from David, please. Just 5 minutes with him. I deleted it without responding, just like the dozens before it. The divorce papers lay signed on my desk, next to a letter from Linda that had arrived that morning. I hadn't opened it yet, wasn't sure I wanted to. Mommy, look. Eli held up his favorite T-Rex. He's protecting the little ones now. Just like you protect me, I said, pulling him close. He squirmed in my arms, suddenly serious. Is Daddy ever coming back? The question I'd been dreading. No, sweetie. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I know. Eli returned to his dinosaurs. He's like the meteors in my book. Too big and scary for the little dinosaurs to survive. My heart cracked at his simple wisdom. 6 years old, and he understood more than David ever had. The doorbell rang, Samantha with pizza and paint samples. Time to make this place yours, she announced, spreading colors across the kitchen counter. Green. Eli pointed to a sage swatch. Like the park near Grandma Linda's. Linda's letter seemed to pulse on my desk. I finally opened it while Eli debated paint colors with Samantha. Dearest Gracie. Paul doesn't know I'm writing this. He's still trying to fix David, as if our son were a broken investment to be restructured. But you and I know better. I spent 30 years watching Paul become the man David tried to be, successful, powerful, empty. I stayed because I thought it would protect my children. You left because you knew it would protect yours. You're braver than I ever was. The trust fund Paul set up for Eli isn't charity, it's insurance. Insurance that David can never use money to control him the way Paul controlled our family. Use it wisely. And Gracie? Thank you for showing me it's never too late to stand up. With love. Linda. Mommy? Eli's voice pulled me back. Can we paint my room today? Sure, baby. I wiped my eyes, tucking the letter away. But first, there's something I need to show you. I pulled out the photo album I'd rescued from our old house. Not the formal portraits David had insisted on, but the real moments, Eli's first steps, beach trips, pillow forts. Pages of love and laughter, untainted by what came after. This is our story, I told him, watching his fingers trace each image. And we're going to keep making it, just us. And Aunt Samantha? And Aunt Samantha, I laughed. And Grandma Linda, whenever you want. But not the meteors, he said firmly, returning to his dinosaur metaphor. No, not the meteors. My phone lit up one last time, Rachel, he's in rehab. Wanted you to know. I set the phone aside, focusing instead on Eli's careful arrangement of paint swatches into a rainbow. Some stories don't need neat endings. Some revenge isn't about destruction, but reconstruction. Building something stronger from the wreckage. Ready to paint? Samantha held up rollers like swords. Eli grabbed one, immediately dotting my nose with green. His giggle echoed off bare walls, filling empty spaces with possibility. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd first found David's hidden phone. It was better. Because revenge hadn't given me back what I'd lost, it had given me something new. A chance to write our own story, without shadows or secrets. Just a mother, a son, and a future as bright as dinosaurs facing the sunrise.
My name is Jenny. I'm 38 years old, and while I used to stay slim without any effort when I was younger, I've noticed a bit of a belly lately. Perhaps this is middle-aged spread. But I suppose it's better than being too skinny like I was in my youth. I keep telling myself this to put off dieting, planning to start next year rather than tomorrow. By next year, I'll probably say, diet? Maybe next year. Now, I'll talk about a time when not only my body but also my mind was finer. Or maybe not. I felt like my heart was covered in thick hair. Well, it's a nostalgic story from those times. I'd love for you to listen. This happened about 10 years ago. My husband Steve's father, my father-in-law, passed away suddenly. That event significantly changed my daily life. It's pitiful to leave my mom alone at home, so I've decided to let her live with us. What? It was our 4th year of marriage. I was speechless at his sudden suggestion. To tell the truth, I don't get along well with my mother-in-law. She adored Steve too much and seemed to have wanted to keep him all to herself without marrying him off. If it couldn't be helped, she would have been okay with him marrying his ex-girlfriend, who she really liked. Well, honestly, that might also be a lie. She probably just said that to spite me. You will never let him marry, will you? Said my father-in-law. I'll end up alone. Steve added, and somehow we got her to agree to our marriage. Then, my mother-in-law proposed living in a duplex house. I was firmly against it, but Steve was like, I'm fine either way. Since then, the clash between my no to duplex and her live in a duplex or give my son back dug a deep rift in our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. My father-in-law used to stop her from going too far, but it seems the balance was lost with his death. Living together. You didn't even discuss this with me. Do I need to discuss having my parents live in a house that's in my name? I was speechless. Maybe he's right. But isn't it strange to decide without discussing it even when we're married? I was both annoyed and confused. However, no matter how many times I asked him to reconsider, Steve repeatedly insisted. It's already decided. Perhaps it would have been better to attach another house next to ours and live as a duplex. If I'm honest, I disliked both options, but at that time, I wished we could have at least discussed it more. Unfortunately, the very next day, my mother-in-law came to our house. When I saw her standing at the front door, the theme from Jaws played in my head, which would be a secret. I thought, oh no, from today on, I really have to live with this woman. Deeply disappointed, I led her to the living room, where she exclaimed, wow. The sense of interior is terrible. Why do you have such ugly sofas and cushions? I braced myself for comments about dirtiness, but the interior design? I'm sorry, Steve chose that. Sorry, Mom. I chose it. Shall we go buy your sofa together? As we said that, my mother-in-law's expression changed completely. Oh, if it's just the sofas, that's a great choice. But the sofas and the cushions don't match, do they? Let's go buy some cushions. She smiled sweetly and intertwined her arm with Steve's like a girlfriend. Seeing this, I got goosebumps on my arms. He also smiled sheepishly and reciprocated. Seriously, no way. Steve has always tended not to argue with his mother. Maybe he's just bad at standing up to his parents. Thanks to her demand for family time. Steve would stay several nights at his parents' house during holidays like Easter and Christmas, while I hardly ever went there except for Christmas. Because of this, I didn't have to watch their interactions for long hours. However, witnessing Steve and mother-in-law like this made me think. Could he be a mama's boy? No, that can't be right. I tried desperately to dismiss my suspicions, but they turned into conviction from the first day of living together. I'm going out to buy cushions with Mom, so you prepare dinner. Mom, what would you like to eat? How about Chinese? Can you make chili shrimp, Jenny? Sure you can, Jenny. I'm counting on you for chili shrimp and other Chinese dishes. With that, the pair left, assigning me the dinner preparation. There was no shrimp in the fridge. I thought, does this mean I also have to go shopping? It's not strange for them to go shopping together, but there's something slightly irritating about it. She didn't move from another state. In fact, her house is just around the corner. She should know the stores around here well enough. Let her buy her own cushions, and you should help with the housework. I had to suppress the urge to punch the wall, and irritated, I went out shopping. After returning from the shopping, I prepared the Chinese cuisine my mother-in-law wanted, waiting for their return. But they didn't come back, even though it was already evening, after having left in the morning. Worried as you would think, I decided to contact him. "Hey, where are you?" "Dinner's ready." "What?" "Dinner, oh, sorry, just eat there." "What do you mean?" "I'm out eating Chinese food with Mom. It's been fun catching up with her, and I completely forgot about dinner at home." "Sorry." Steve laughed as if he had made a simple oversight. Hearing his laughter, I felt a boiling frustration. After going out of my way to buy groceries and cook for 3, I thought, if you were going to eat out, I could have just made something simple for myself. Nevertheless, I didn't want to eat with her anyway, so I didn't feel left behind. Anyway, it's only natural to be upset when you are asked by someone to prepare a meal and then get abandoned. This rocky start made me wonder if I could really manage living with my mother-in-law in the future. My anxiety only grew over the following 2 weeks. The relationship with my mother-in-law, which I had hoped might improve, only deteriorated day by day. She would constantly criticize my way of doing housework and my lifestyle. "Take a bath before cooking dinner, it's unhygienic." "Don't store perishables in their original packaging in the fridge, transfer them to airtight containers to avoid odors." "Don't use disposable wipes for cleaning. Just use a rag." While I could almost understand her nitpicking, her next demand was baffling. "Don't go to bed before Steve. Wait at least an hour and a half after he does." What kind of rule is that? It seemed like she was taking her son's authority too far. While I wanted to suggest sharing household duties since we were living together, I held back because I wanted to get along with her. I really wanted to improve the tense atmosphere in our home, so I tried my best to follow my mother-in-law's instructions as much as possible. However, my efforts proved futile. For example, one day, she scolded me for keeping perishables in their original packaging in the fridge. I followed her instructions, but the following day she would likely scold me for transferring them into different containers, claiming the containers would now smell. Her instructions change daily, and what she tells me one day often becomes a completely different story the next. This seemed to be her way of harassing her daughter-in-law. It was incredibly petty, and her smirking after criticizing me was infuriating. Enduring such treatment from morning till night, even someone as tough as me reached their mental limit. Living together for just 2 weeks felt like more than 6 months. I tried discussing this with Steve in our bedroom, but he was hardly supportive. Around that time, he had been overly attached to his mother, even meeting her for dates after work. When was the last time he dated me? Thus, my requests for him to mediate between his mother and me were futile. Mom's cooking has always been delicious. If she says to mind the fridge odors, she's right. She's a respectable mother, so you should just listen to her. You're always complaining about Mom. You don't empathize with how she feels living alone with us at all. Mom is always right. Maybe we should have reconsidered this marriage since she was against it. His praises for her mother was just endless. While I was constantly belittled despite doing all the housework, her inconsistent advice, which she proudly upheld, was increasingly validated. Eventually, I realized it was futile to argue and started thinking about how to endure each day without letting them get to me. It was easier to just nod along and ignore them. Just as I thought I had figured out how to cope, another incident occurred. "Are we having fritters today?" "Oh. Why did you include eggplants, which I hate? Are you trying to upset me?" Seeing the dinner dishes, she shouted. "Sorry, I didn't know. But Steve likes it." I genuinely didn't know it was her disliked food, so I felt truly sorry. However, it seems it was a mistake to say. "But Steve likes it." At that time. That's obvious. Do you think I don't know my own son's tastes? She yelled, infuriated. No, that's not what I meant. Please, don't pull on my apron, it's dangerous. As she yanked on my apron and even tried to pull my hair, she screamed. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. You think you can just show up and take over? I am his one and only mother. Just as she pulled my apron sharply, the tie around my waist came undone, and I lost my balance, causing a pot of hot oil to tip over. Oh my gosh. I promptly pushed her away and dodged the oil, preventing a major accident. However, I couldn't avoid burning the tips of my left toes. Fortunately, it was only a minor burn from the oil that had cooled slightly after spilling. Before I could even cool my fingertips, I endured the pain and asked my mother-in-law, "Are you okay?" She angrily shouted back, "That was dangerous. It's all because you were flailing about. I could have been burned because of you. What a frightening daughter-in-law you are." "What? You were pulling on my apron." "I was just trying to stop you." "Didn't I say it was dangerous? Are you talking back now? After putting me in danger and not even apologizing. You really have no manners. I'd like to see who raised you." I swallowed the words I wanted to say back. "You saw my parents at the wedding, didn't you?" I had pushed her away to prevent her from getting burned, yet I was the one who got injured. And still, why must I be scolded like this? "With all due respect, Mother." Just as I was about to retort, Steve came in from the front door. "Really, if you're home, open the door. It's awful not to even unlock it when I ring the bell." Before him was the hot pot, the scattered oil, and a little distance away, his wife in disarray and his mother in a fury. Even my foolish husband could see something was terribly wrong. His face had turned pale. "What happened here?" he asked, to which his mother clung to him, crying, "Steve, help me. What's going on, Mom?" Jenny suddenly started raging while she was cooking. I tried to stop her because it was dangerous, and she pushed me. "What?" I almost got severely burned by the oil. It was terrifying. "I know you might be upset, Jenny, but please, stop bullying an old woman like me." After saying that, the mother-in-law looked at me and smirked. Steve, believing I was at fault without question, glared at me. I had been framed. "You've been acting too high and mighty towards Mom lately." "What?" I was stunned by his sudden accusation. Far from acting superior, I had mostly been on the receiving end of orders. Most of the time, it was too tiring to argue, so I just agreed with whatever was said. It was absurd for him to say such things based only on what he heard from his mother, especially since he never witnessed how she constantly berated me. "Mom is just trying to teach you how to be a good wife. Just follow her lead." After shouting at me, Steve looked satisfied with himself, and the mother-in-law applauded him. No one bothered to ask if I was hurt. I was furious. Ignoring him and mother-in-law, I cooled my foot. While my temper did not subside and I remained irritated, fortunately, the burn cooled down. Every time they saw me, they accused me of trying to hurt the mother-in-law, calling me a terrible wife. But I ignored all their comments. Let them say what they want. They'll be the ones to regret it in the end. The next day, I called my father and explained everything that had happened. "That house is dangerous, come back home." He said that, but I asked for his help with something. Although he wanted to bring me home immediately, he became enthusiastic about helping once he heard my plan. That same day, my father came to the house where I lived with Steve and mother-in-law. My mom and dad are close to divorcing because they've been arguing, and it's sad to leave him in such a tense home, so I've decided to let my dad live with us from today. When I announced this, both Steve and mother-in-law were confused and started to object. "What? Don't joke, Jenny. You can't just decide that without consulting me. That's too selfish, Jenny." How dare they say that? That's rich coming from you. You decided to live with your mother without consulting me at all. As I glared at him, Steve retorted. "That's because this house is in my name." "Yes, the house is in your name. But I had forgotten, but I used my savings from before we were married as the down payment for this house. Thinking about it, isn't this marital property?" When Steve suddenly announced he would be living with his mother, I was too embarrassed to argue back then because I didn't know better. However, if a house is in Steve's name and the wife has contributed to the payments, it's considered marital property. Additionally, there was a time when I was paying the living expenses from my part-time job earnings. Therefore, there's no reason for him to do whatever he wants with his house because it's also mine. My comment left Steve speechless. The mother-in-law, flustered, looked back and forth between us. By the way, Steve, did you wash those clothes yourself? Caught off guard by my father's sudden comment, Steve looked bewildered. No. Jenny does the housework. At this, my father raised an eyebrow. Jenny's job? Don't you help out at all? This is your house, isn't it? Don't you do any housework in your own house? Well, the house belongs to Jenny too. You just boasted that it was your house. Can't you take care of your own home? Please stop. Steve is pitiful. As my father and Steve argued, the mother-in-law intervened. My father, knowing the situation from my stories, stared sternly at her. Oh. And who made that breakfast this morning? Jenny did. Do you have a problem with that? Of course, I do. You just eat the food she makes and wear the clothes she washes. And when I blamed him for that, you say Steve is pitiful? Isn't my daughter the one who's pitiful? Father continued. The only time you can say pitiful is if Steve does more housework than my daughter, and nevertheless I blame him unnecessarily. Are you saying it's pitiful because it's spot on and you want me to stop pointing it out? As my father relentlessly pointed out their faults, both Steve and his mother's faces turned red. Dad, let's leave it at that. You're right, but if you go on, these two might cry from embarrassment. They brought it upon themselves, yet they're so fragile. Laughing, my father's laughter made me chuckle too. What the hell? You're my wife, so of course, you should take care of me. Yes. It's enviable that you get to take care of Steve. I'd switch places with you if I could. Are they out of their minds? Do they even have brains? Steve, what you're describing isn't a wife but a slave, or maybe an unconditional mother who does everything for you. A wife should automatically take care of her husband's personal needs? Then, as a husband, you should also take care of mine. Marriage is about equality. My words made Steve freeze, and the mother-in-law became furious. Jenny. How can you speak to Steve like that? Oh, I'm just teaching Steve how to be a husband. I would like him to follow it properly. Don't you think so? And how exactly have you been speaking to my daughter, madam? My father and I mirrored the accusations they had made. Confronted with their own words, Steve and his mother fell silent. Really? People who can't do anything by themselves shouldn't be giving orders. All you do is tell others what to do without lifting a finger yourselves. Even when the pot tipped over last time. You seem to believe everything your mother says, but remember, I was the one who saved your precious mom. Steve widened his eyes in surprise at my words. That time, your mother was the one who attacked me while I was cooking. She caused the pot to nearly tip over, so I had to push her away to protect her. I ended up getting burned because of it. And yet, neither of you thanked me. Instead, you both blamed me. I've had enough of this house. My blunt words made Steve raise his voice. Wait, Jenny, what do you mean by enough? His face, which had been red with embarrassment, quickly turned pale. Enough means just that. I'm done with this house, with you, with everything. I'm filing for divorce. The mother-in-law grinned, pleased, while Steve froze. Wait, Jenny. I don't hate you. Maybe I got a bit carried away, it was just youthful folly. I was taking you for granted. Please understand. Youthful folly doesn't turn someone into a mama's boy. No matter what you say now, I dislike having a husband who walks arm in arm with his mother. What? It seemed that Steve had always considered such behavior normal. For the first time, he looked puzzled as if asking. That was the problem? No way we can understand each other in a lifetime. Choosing divorce is the right decision. However, the mother-in-law seemed unhappy with Steve's reaction. Steve, you don't need to hold on to such a woman. I'm here for you. She clung to him as if she were his girlfriend. But he shook her off. It's because Mom clings to me that things have gotten to this point. It's like everyone says I'm a mama's boy. It's your fault, Mom. What's wrong with being a mama's boy? You used to tell me how much you loved me. What are you talking about? I've always felt you were in the way. Please, Jenny, come back. I'll cut ties with her. What do you mean, Steve? Would you choose a woman who wants to abandon you over your own mother who raised you? Quiet. Just shut up, Mom. Traitor Steve. Heartless son. I trusted you. As a fierce argument broke out between mother and son, my father and I watched quietly for a moment, then exchanged a knowing look. Let's go home, Jenny. The atmosphere here is too toxic. Yes. It feels like even my lungs are becoming mama's boy. Thus, my brief marriage came to an end. Later, I mailed the divorce papers and successfully finalized the divorce. There was no compensation, which was fine by me as I was eager to cut ties quickly. Steve remained with his mother after saying he would cut ties, but when he tried to remarry a woman 5 years his junior, problems arose. His mother did not like the girl. Moreover, she tried to sabotage their relationship, leading to Steve finally cutting her off in anger. Later, it turned out that the girl was cheating, so the remarriage was called off, and Steve tried to reconcile with his mother. But this time, her mood did not improve. Having been repeatedly told he valued other women over his mother, she had finally had enough of him. Shocked, Steve fell into a spiral, becoming obsessed with a girl at a nightclub and ending up in debt. It's ironic that he cut ties with his mother and then couldn't handle the shock. Well, that's just like my ex-husband, always only seeing things from his point of view. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life without remarrying. The company I joined after the divorce turned out to be a great fit for me since I excel in roles involving interaction with people. Thanks to my achievements there, I've been promoted quickly. Work has become more enjoyable than romance. While it's still hard for women to reach the same status as men, I'm aiming high. Holding one of the highest positions among women, it's not an impossible situation. It might still take some time, but having goals in life makes things interesting. Starting my job has broadened my social network and increased my circle of friends. Recently, I've even made friends at the sports gym I started attending with colleagues, and now we're planning a trip together. By the way, I've started dieting. No one interferes, and though it's not flashy, my days are sparkling with fun.
I stared at Tom's back as he walked away, his sister Nancy trailing behind him like an obedient lapdog. Maggie, taking care of your mother-in-law is your job while we're gone. Don't mess it up, he tossed over his shoulder, without even a glance in my direction. As the front door slammed shut, I let out a long breath, my shoulders sagging. 4 weeks alone with Caroline, Tom's bedridden, mute mother. The same woman who had treated me with thinly veiled disdain from the moment I'd married her son 5 years ago. I trudged up the stairs to Caroline's room, dreading the next month. She lay motionless on the bed, her pale, wrinkled face expressionless as always. Well, Caroline, looks like it's just you and me, I muttered, receiving no response. The first week passed in a blur of monotony. I fed Caroline, bathed her, changed her bedding, all while she stared blankly ahead, never uttering a sound. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. On the 8th day, something shifted. As I leaned over to adjust Caroline's pillows, her bony hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. I gasped, meeting her piercing blue eyes for the first time. Enough of this charade, Maggie, she rasped, her voice rough from disuse. We have work to do. I could only gape at her, my mind reeling. Caroline pushed herself upright, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. But how? You've been pretending, she finished, a wry smile tugging at her lips, playing the helpless old woman to avoid dealing with my wretched family. As she began to explain, revealing a web of deceit and cruelty I'd never imagined, a fierce determination took root within me. Tom's betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever known, but now with Caroline's help, I would unravel every last secret. The game was on. As Caroline's revelations sank in, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Shock, anger, betrayal. I had always known Tom's family was a little off, but this was a whole new level of depravity. How could you let them treat you like that? I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. You're their mother, their own flesh and blood. Caroline's expression hardened. At first, I tried to fight back, but they slowly stripped me of everything. My money, my power, even my dignity. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. Her eyes bored into mine, icy and resolute. That's why we have to stop them, Maggie, before they do the same to you. A shiver ran down my spine at her ominous words. Was that Tom's plan all along? To isolate me, make me dependent on him and his vile family? The thought made me sick. Start from the beginning, I urged Caroline. I need to know everything. And so she told me a sordid tale of greed, manipulation, and outright cruelty that made my blood boil. How her late husband's inheritance had sparked a vicious power struggle within the family. How Tom and Nancy had slowly turned against her, stripping her assets and forcing her into a life of subservience, all under the guise of caring for their poor, helpless mother. By the time Caroline finished, hot tears of rage stung my eyes. Those bastards, I spat, using their own mother like that. A gnarled hand gripped mine, startling me. That's why we have to fight back, Caroline stated, her voice laced with steel. They won't see it coming. A plan began to form, pieces slotting into place like a twisted puzzle. We would follow Tom and his wretched family to Maui, catch them in the act of whatever new scheme they were hatching. And when we did, justice would be ours. Over the next few days, Caroline and I hatched our plan. She knew someone who could help us, an old friend named Mark who used to work as a private investigator. Are you sure we can trust him? I asked warily as Caroline dialed the number. She shot me a reassuring look. Mark's one of the few decent people left in this world. He'll help us bring those snakes down. The phone call was brief, but by the time Caroline hung up, a sly grin had crept across her weathered features. He's in. Said he's been itching for some juicy drama to sink his teeth into. A surprising burst of laughter escaped my lips. Who would have thought sweet demure Maggie Owens would be plotting an elaborate revenge scheme? If Tom could see me now... The thought of my treacherous husband sobered me instantly. Caroline must have noticed my change in demeanor, because she reached out and gave my hand a comforting squeeze. I know it hurts, dear. Believe me, I understand the pain of having your own family betray you. Her eyes hardened. But that's exactly why we have to do this, to show them we're not just a couple of helpless old ladies to be manipulated and cast aside. Her words lit a fire in my belly. She was right. For too long, I had meekly accepted the crumbs Tom and his vicious brood deigned to toss my way. But not anymore. This time, we would be the ones calling the shots. Mark arrived 2 days later, a rumpled but kind-looking man in his 40s. As Caroline introduced us, I studied him carefully, looking for any signs of dishonesty or ulterior motives, but his warm brown eyes crinkled with genuine compassion as he shook my hand. "Don't you worry, Maggie," he said in a gentle southern drawl. "We're going to nail those lying snakes, but good." And so we got to work, poring over flight manifests and hotel reservations, mapping out every step of Tom's upcoming trip to Maui. With each detail we uncovered, my resolve solidified like steel. Finally, the day arrived. As I stood in the kitchen watching the black Suburban pull away, Tom's stupid smug face visible through the tinted windows, I felt a surge of vicious satisfaction. Let him enjoy this little vacation. It would be his last taste of freedom before everything came crashing down around him. I turned to find Caroline and Mark watching me, twin expressions of grim determination etched on their faces. Time to go hunting. With Tom and his family now en route to Maui, the real work began. Mark sprang into action, a whirlwind of phone calls and computer searches as he dug up every scrap of intel on their targets. "This Tom fella sure loves his luxury resorts," he muttered, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "But we can use that against him." Caroline and I huddled close, watching with bated breath as Mark cross-referenced hotel listings and flight schedules. Finally, he circled something with a triumphant flourish. Got it! They're staying at the Grand Wailea Resort. Pricey place, but that means more staff to bribe for information. He shot us a conspiratorial wink. A sly grin tugged at Caroline's lips. Excellent work, Mark. Now about getting us over there discreetly. By the time Tom's sniveling voice crackled over the answering machine with some half-baked excuse about needing to extend their stay, we were ready. Fake identities, meticulously forged documents, Mark had covered every base with the same care as a master artist crafting his next masterpiece. The morning we left, I stood in the driveway, squinting against the harsh Arizona sun as I drank in the sight of my quaint little house. Once upon a time, it had represented everything I'd ever wanted: a loving home, a caring husband, maybe even children someday. Now it was just another empty facade, a monument to the lies my life had become. Tossing my suitcase into the trunk with a decisive thunk, I slid into the back seat beside Caroline. Her face was set in stony determination, any traces of frailty or fear utterly banished. This was a woman who had stared into the depths of betrayal and emerged emboldened, ready to face any challenge head-on. As Mark peeled out of the driveway, I twisted in my seat for one last glimpse of the house rapidly disappearing behind us. A strange sense of finality washed over me, as if I were shedding an old, tarnished skin and being reborn into something new, something stronger, uncompromising, unafraid. This time, there would be no more lies, no more hiding in the shadows while others schemed and plotted in the light. This time, the snakes would get their just desserts. Maui was every bit as beautiful as the glossy travel brochures promised: sun-drenched beaches, swaying palms, and crystal-clear waters that seemed to beckon weary souls. Too bad we weren't there for a vacation. Mark had booked us a modest room at a different resort, far enough away to avoid any accidental run-ins with Tom's crew. Not that they'd recognize us anyway, thanks to his meticulously crafted fake identities. First order of business, he said, tossing a stack of crisp bills on the rickety table, is getting eyes and ears inside the Grand Wailea. Caroline's eyes glinted with determination. Leave that to me, dear. I have a few tricks left up my sleeve. True to her word, within 48 hours, she'd made some very lucrative friends among the resort staff: a maid, a bartender, even the concierge. All it took was flashing a little cash, and they were more than happy to keep their eyes peeled for any suspicious behavior from the Owens family. The first report came 3 days later, delivered in a hushed voice over burner phones like we were deep undercover spies. Becca, the maid, had spotted Tom getting awfully cozy with a pretty young blonde by the adult pool, hand-holding, whispered endearments, the works. White-hot rage lanced through me at the mental image. So not only was the bastard cheating, he was bold enough to do it right under his family's noses? I fought the urge to hurl the phone across the room as Caroline flashed me a sympathetic look. There's more, Becca continued in a trembling voice. I overheard Nancy and that trollop Becca talking about some kind of plan to cut you out, Maggie, make it look like you just up and left Tom high and dry so they could take the house. The room seemed to spin around me as the weight of her words sank in. So that's what this whole sick charade had been about, robbing me of everything I had left, leaving me destitute and alone. Tears of fury stung my eyes as Caroline reached out to grip my arm, steadying me. Breathe. Maggie, she murmured. We've got them right where we want them. Taking a shuddering breath, I forced myself to nod. Caroline was right. Panicking now would only play right into their hands. We had to stay focused, gather every last shred of evidence to crush them utterly. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Sordid details of Tom's affair, overheard conversations about their insidious plot to steal my home and inheritance. With each new revelation, the white-hot anger burning in my chest flared brighter, becoming an inferno of righteous indignation that threatened to consume me. Finally, the night before we were scheduled to strike, Mark gathered us around the cheap motel table with a grim look. We've got everything we need to bury those snakes, he stated, his deep voice laced with conviction. Photos, recordings, the whole 9 yards. They won't be able to talk their way out of this one. Caroline reached across the table, grasping my hand in a vice-like grip. Are you ready, dear? Once we start down this road, there's no turning back. Meeting her blazing gaze, I felt something shift deep inside, a sense of unshakable purpose, of being in the dead calm eye of the storm before all hell broke loose. This was it, the moment everything changed. "Let's do this," I said, the words ringing with a cold finality. Tomorrow, the Owens family would reap what they'd sown, and this time, I'd be the one dealing the blows. The next evening, showtime arrived. Mark had managed to score us a reservation at Ferraro's, one of the ritziest restaurants at the Grand Wailea, the perfect place to spring our trap. As the valet whisked our rental car away, I smoothed my hands over the slinky black dress Caroline had insisted I wear. "You want them squirming, dear," she'd said with a wicked glint in her eye. "Give them something to look at." The maitre d' led us through the opulent dining room, weaving between tables filled with vacationing millionaires obliviously enjoying their overpriced meals. My heart was pounding a staccato rhythm in my chest as we approached our destination, a semi-secluded alcove near the back, perfectly positioned for our little encounter. They were already there. Tom, resplendent in a tailored linen suit that probably cost more than my car. Nancy, draped in gaudy jewels befitting a faded aristocrat. And beside them, the pretty young blonde I recognized from the photos, Becca, Tom's latest conquest. I felt Caroline tense beside me as we approached, no doubt fighting the urge to rush forward and unleash decades of pent-up fury. Mark's reassuring hand on my elbow was the only thing keeping me grounded. Tom was the first to notice us, his brow furrowing in confusion that quickly morphed into ill-concealed panic. "And Maggie? What are you doing here?" Well, if it isn't the happy family," I drawled, surprised by the biting sarcasm dripping from my words. "Enjoying your vacation, Tom?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, shooting panicked glances between me and the oblivious Becca. Nancy, never one to be upstaged, puffed out her bony chest in a pitiful attempt at bravado. "And just what is the meaning of this, Maggie?" she snapped, lips curling into a condescending sneer. "Barging in on our family holiday, putting on such a shameful display. Can it, Nancy?" The words sliced through her tirade like a hot knife through butter. We both know this is no family vacation. With a deft flick of my wrist, I spread the damning photos across the crisp linen tablecloth. Tom draped all over Becca by the pool, whispering into her ear, his face drained of color as his mistress's pretty features contorted in shock and revulsion. You've been watching us?" he choked out, hands trembling. A cruel smile twisted my lips. "Among other things, care to explain to your little friend here about your plan to steal my home? My inheritance?" Becca's head whipped around, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and bewildered hurt. "Tom, what is she talking about?" The question seemed to catalyze something within him. Suddenly he was on his feet, fists clenched, a vein pulsing angrily in his forehead. "You stupid little he snarled, seemingly forgetting we were surrounded by gawking onlookers. That's when Caroline made her move. With a spryness that belied her age, she shot out of her seat and seized him by the lapels, slamming him back into his chair with a surprising burst of strength. "Not another word out of you," she hissed, her face a mask of pure venom as she loomed over her cowering son. "You've tormented me for the last time." Tom's eyes bulged in shock and terror as he finally registered the woman restraining him, the same helpless old crone he'd been belittling and demeaning for years. "Mom? But how?" The sickly sweet smile she turned on him then was somehow more chilling than any glare. "What's the matter, Tommy? You look like you've seen a ghost." The shocked silence that fell over our secluded alcove was deafening. Tom stared up at his mother in abject horror, as if she'd grown a second head right before his eyes. Nancy looked equally stunned, her bravado evaporating like smoke. "But you were bedridden," Tom finally sputtered, grasping at straws. "We took care of you, Mother, after Dad died and left everything in shambles." "Don't you dare play the victim with me, Thomas Owens." Caroline spat, her frail body practically vibrating with pent-up rage. "Not after what you and your wretched sister did to me." Her piercing gaze swung to Nancy, who shrank back in her chair. "Stripping me of my assets, my dignity, my very identity, all for that blasted inheritance. Did you really think I wouldn't eventually catch on to your game?" It was like a dam had burst. Years of deception, manipulation, and suffering came pouring out in a torrent of recriminations. Caroline laid it all bare, The vicious power struggle that erupted after her husband's death, the slow erosion of her autonomy at the hands of her own children, the utter disregard they'd shown her as a human being. "We did what was best for the family," Nancy attempted feebly, but her protests were swiftly silenced by a withering glare. "Best for the family?" Caroline laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Or best for your own greed? I may be old, but I'm not senile. I know exactly what you two vipers were planning here in Maui." She jerked her chin toward the still scattered photos, Tom and Becca's indiscretions laid bare for all to see. Using this little tramp to cuckold Maggie, make her look unhinged so you could steal her home out from under her, just like you did to me. Becca made a small, pained noise in the back of her throat, tears welling in her wide eyes. Tom reached out a placating hand, but she flinched away, revulsion etched across her delicate features. Is that true?" She turned to me, anguish and betrayal writ large. "Were you just using me to take everything from your wife?" The lost, broken look on Tom's face would have almost been comical if the situation weren't so twisted. His mouth worked soundlessly as he floundered for an excuse, any lie to salvage what was left of his pathetic charade. In the end, he simply slumped back in his chair, a puppet with its strings cut, defeated. Nancy, however, wasn't quite ready to surrender. Rounding on me with bared teeth, she hissed, "You little bitch! After everything we've done for you, putting a roof over your head, clothes on your back." "That's enough." The words sliced through Nancy's vitriol like a blade, cold and utterly devoid of mercy. Straightening to my full height, I met her hateful glare with an icy one of my own. "Your lies and manipulations end here," I stated, each word ringing with finality. "The Maggie you knew, the sweet, naive little doormat, is gone. Don't like it?" I gestured to the surrounding diners, gawking in scandalized fascination. "Too bad. The whole world can see you for what you really are now." A muscle twitched in Nancy's jaw, but she seemed to realize the futility of arguing. Slowly, almost grudgingly, she sank back into her seat in sullen defeat. As I surveyed the shattered remains of the Owens clan, a strange sense of lightness washed over me, as if a crushing weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders after all this time. The anger, the hurt, the years of rage and resentment, it all seemed to melt away in that moment, leaving only a hollow sort of pity in its wake. These were just sad, small people obsessed with wealth and status, to the point of self-destruction. By trying to control me, they'd ultimately lost everything, their money, their standing, even each other. And in the end, their defeat was entirely of their own making. The flight back from Maui was a blur. Caroline and I huddled together in the emergency exit row, sipping tiny bottles of bourbon and relishing the silence. For once, there were no snakes waiting to strike from the shadows, just the promise of a new beginning. Mark had already made arrangements to handle the legal ramifications of Tom's exposed misdeeds. With his connections and the wealth of evidence we'd gathered, he assured us that the appropriate authorities would be brought into the loop to address any potential criminal charges. As for me, I simply didn't have the energy to even think about pressing charges or going through a lengthy legal battle. I just wanted to move on. The first thing I did when we returned to Arizona was put the house on the market. It didn't take long to find a buyer. Tom's family had done me the favor of selecting a home in a prime neighborhood. As I signed the final paperwork that transferred ownership, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness watching the new owner's excited expressions. "Try not to make the same mistakes I did," I couldn't help but murmur as I handed over the keys. With the house settled, it was time to decide my next steps. Caroline and I spent an evening camped out at a local diner, poring over maps and apartment listings as we tried to figure out our new path. "I was thinking somewhere new," she said, tracing her finger over the map. "A fresh start, away from all these bad memories." I nodded slowly. As much as I'd once loved the idea of settling down in the suburbs, raising a family of my own, that dream felt tainted now, irrevocably tarnished by Tom's betrayal and the upheaval that followed. Maybe it was for the best to leave it all behind, to forge ahead into the unknown. "I'm open to it," I agreed. "Any preferences?" Caroline's eyes took on a distant look as she studied the map. "You know, I've always wanted to see New England in the fall. The changing leaves, the crisp air." She let out a contented sigh. It seems like it would be a lovely place to plant some new roots. I couldn't help but smile at the image she painted, the two of us surrounded by vibrant autumn splendor, finally at peace after the turmoil we'd endured. A chance to reinvent ourselves in a place where the Owens name meant nothing. New England it is, then. In the weeks that followed, we began making preparations for our new life, selling or donating what little we had left in Arizona, researching potential towns and job prospects in the Northeast. With each day that passed, it became easier to shed the weight of the past and look ahead with a sense of renewal. On the morning we were set to depart, I took one last walk through the empty house. Upstairs, I peeked into the room that had once been mine and Caroline's command center, covered in maps and photographs detailing every minute of our revenge plot. So much had happened within these walls, so much hurt and anger, yes, but also a reckoning long overdue. A bittersweet smile tugged at my lips as I turned away. The past was the past, the slithering shadows forever banished. Whatever lay ahead in New England was still a mystery, but this time I vowed to march forward with open eyes and a fearless heart. After all, we had already faced down the worst the Owens family could throw at us. From here, the path could only lead forward. As I made my way down the stairs one final time, I felt lighter than I had in years, free of the burdens that once weighed me down. Out in the hallway, Caroline was waiting with an expectant look. "Ready, dear?" she asked, a warm, conspiratorial smile curving her lips. Returning her smile, I gave a decisive nod. We had made it through the shadows. Now it was time to embrace the light. Leaving work early, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of dread. As I, Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old part-time marketing assistant, approached my home, the unease grew. My mind was racing, but I brushed off the anxiety as a side effect of not feeling well. Little did I know that my world was about to be turned upside down. Stepping into the silent house, I felt the atmosphere shift. The home I shared with my husband Daniel felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. Driven by an inexplicable instinct, I found myself tiptoeing towards the back room where muffled voices broke the eerie silence. My heart pounded against my chest, a sense of impending doom taking hold. I hesitated at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The voices became clearer, a man and a woman, intimately engaged in conversation. Pushing the door open just a crack, I peered inside. The sight that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Daniel, my husband of 3 years, was entwined with a younger woman. Their laughter and affectionate whispers were a stark contrast to the coldness and distance that had crept into our marriage. I stood there, frozen, as Daniel's words sliced through the last threads of trust I had clung to. "Marrying Laura was a mistake," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "Young and beautiful is what I deserve. Isabel, you make me feel alive." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. This was not the time for weakness. I needed to be strong, to think clearly. Quietly, I closed the door and retreated, my mind racing with the betrayal I had just witnessed. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the realization that the man I loved saw me as nothing more than a mistake. As I made my way to the living room, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed evidence, something concrete to expose them for what they were. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. No, who was I kidding? It was about both. I knew I had to be careful, to play my cards right. Daniel was a lawyer, cunning and persuasive. I couldn't confront him without solid proof, so I decided to gather evidence of his infidelity. It was time for me to step out of the shadows and take control of my life. In the days that followed, I became a silent observer in my own home, collecting pieces of their betrayal. Text messages, late-night calls, the subtle changes in Daniel's behavior, everything was a clue, a piece of the puzzle I was putting together. I was no longer the trusting, naive wife. I was a woman on a mission, a woman wronged, ready to strike back. As I lay in bed each night, planning my next move, I realized this was more than just about exposing Daniel and Isabel. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. I was ready to face the storm. I had to be. When Daniel and I first met, it felt like a scene out of a romantic movie. He was a charismatic lawyer, and I, a marketing assistant, found myself drawn to his confidence and charm. Our courtship was a whirlwind, filled with laughter, deep conversations, and promises of a future together. We married within a year, a decision that seemed right at the time, but now felt like a hasty mistake. Our married life began like a dream. Daniel was attentive, caring, and seemed genuinely interested in my life, but as the months passed, the facade began to crumble. He became more absorbed in his work, often returning late, and our conversations dwindled to mundane exchanges. One evening, as we sat in silence over dinner, I attempted to bridge the growing gap between us. "Daniel, we barely talk anymore. Is everything okay at work?" I asked, reaching for his hand. He withdrew his hand and replied coldly, "Work is fine, Laura. I'm just tired. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under." His words stung, creating a rift that only grew with time. As Daniel's detachment increased, so did my workload at home and the office. I tried to compensate for his absence by keeping the house perfect and excelling at my job, hoping it would bring back the man I fell in love with. Then came the day that marked the beginning of the end. Daniel, in a rare moment of candor, shared his thoughts on our marriage. "Laura, you know I love you, but I feel like you're not pulling your weight financially. I'm carrying the burden of our expenses, and it's not fair." His words felt like a slap. I had been contributing as much as I could from my part-time job, cutting back on personal expenses to support our household. "But Daniel, I've been trying my best. I'm already stretched thin between work and home," I protested. Daniel scoffed, "Your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you worked harder or got a better job, we wouldn't be in this situation." His dismissive attitude left me reeling. I thought of the late nights, the unending household chores, and the sacrifices I had made for our marriage. It was clear that my efforts and my love were not enough for him. That night, I lay awake, contemplating our relationship. The man I married, the man I thought would be my partner in life, had become a stranger. His words echoed in my head, a constant reminder of the growing void between us. The seeds of doubt and resentment took root, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. The days following that conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Daniel's indifference towards me grew, and with it my sense of isolation. I started to dread his return home each evening, not knowing which version of him I'd face, the cold, distant husband, or the one who saw me as a financial burden. One particularly tense evening, Daniel arrived home earlier than usual. I greeted him with a cautious optimism, hoping for a semblance of the warmth we once shared. "You're home early. Is everything okay?" I asked. Daniel's response was curt, his eyes void of any warmth. "I left early to talk about something important. We need to discuss our finances again." His tone was not inviting a conversation, but demanding a resolution. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What about our finances?" I inquired, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about the mortgage, Laura. I'm not okay with shouldering most of the burden. You need to contribute more." His words were like daggers, undermining my efforts and sacrifices. I couldn't contain my frustration. "I'm already giving nearly all of my income towards the mortgage, Daniel. How much more do you expect me to contribute?" My voice was a mix of anger and desperation. Daniel leaned back, his expression one of annoyance. "That's not enough. You should consider increasing your work hours or finding a higher-paying job. Being cooped up at home isn't good for anyone." His suggestion hit me like a wave of ice-cold water. "Increase my work hours? I'm already struggling to balance my job with the housework you leave entirely to me." Daniel stood up, his demeanor turning hostile. "That's your job, Laura. I'm out working all day, earning for us. It's only fair you take care of the house, and frankly, you're not even doing a great job at that." I was stunned into silence. His words were not just hurtful. They were a complete dismissal of everything I had been doing for us, for our home. It was clear that in his eyes I was failing at being a wife, a partner. As he walked away, leaving me standing there, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling inside me, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and undervalued. The man I married was gone, replaced by this cold, unfeeling stranger. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of his words crushing me, I realized that my marriage was not just strained, it was broken, and I was the only one trying to fix it. It was time to stop. It was time to start thinking about myself, about my worth. And most importantly, it was time to start planning my escape from this toxic relationship. The days blurred together in a haze of resentment and disbelief. Daniel's demands and coldness continued, each word chipping away at the last remnants of our marriage. Then, one fateful day, I stumbled upon a truth that would change everything. I arrived home from work, expecting the usual empty house, only to find Daniel's car in the driveway. Confused, I entered quietly, only to hear laughter from the living room, a sound so rare in our home nowadays. Peering around the corner, my heart stopped. There was Daniel, cozy and relaxed, with Isabel, the same woman I had seen him with that day. Suppressing the urge to confront them, I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was no casual visit. The intimacy between them was palpable, undeniable. And then it hit me. Isabel wasn't just a fling, she was a full-blown affair. Later that evening, after Isabel had left, I faced Daniel. "Who is Isabel, really?" "She seems more than just a friend," I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Daniel's reaction was swift and dismissive. "She's just a colleague. Don't make a big deal out of it, Laura." But I knew better. The way he avoided my gaze, the tension in his voice, it was all too clear. Daniel was lying, and I was done being the fool. That night, I lay in bed, my mind made up. I needed proof of his betrayal, something concrete to expose him and free myself from this sham of a marriage. My plan was simple, yet risky. I would record their encounters, gather evidence of the affair. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own home, watching, waiting. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One afternoon, I returned home to find them together again. This time, I was prepared. With my phone discreetly positioned, I recorded their intimate conversation, their plans, their betrayal. As I listened to the recording later, a mix of sorrow and rage washed over me. But there was also a sense of empowerment. I had the evidence I needed. It was time to act, to end this farce and reclaim my dignity. With each step of my plan, a sense of clarity and determination grew within me. This was not just about revenge, it was about justice. For too long I had been a spectator in my own life, but no more. I was ready to face Daniel and Isabel, to expose their deceit. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. Armed with the evidence of Daniel's infidelity, I felt a newfound strength. It was no longer about salvaging a broken marriage, it was about exposing the truth and getting justice. But first, I needed an ally, someone who would be as impacted by this revelation as I was. My opportunity came unexpectedly. While going through Daniel's phone one evening, I discovered that Isabel was not only married, but her husband, James, was a prominent client of Daniel's firm. This was more than just personal. It was a professional bombshell that would have far-reaching consequences. I contacted James, introducing myself as Daniel's wife, and requesting a meeting under the guise of discussing an urgent matter about our spouses. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. The look on James's face when I revealed the affair was a mixture of shock, anger, and betrayal. James's reaction was visceral. "Isabel and your husband? This is unbelievable. How long has this been going on?" he demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. I shared the evidence, watching as his face contorted with pain and fury. "I had my suspicions, but this is concrete proof. She's betrayed me, and with your husband, no less." The plan was set into motion. James would confront Isabel and I would confront Daniel, both of us armed with the undeniable truth. It was a risky move, but I was past caring. I wanted to see Daniel's facade crumble, to watch him face the consequences of his actions. The confrontation with Daniel was cathartic. I watched as his face turned pale, his usual confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of his exposed secrets. "Laura, this isn't what it looks like. We can talk about this," he stammered, his voice betraying his panic. "No, Daniel, there's nothing left to talk about. I know everything. And so does James," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The fallout was swift and devastating. James filed for divorce and cut all personal and professional ties with Daniel. Isabel's world came crashing down, and Daniel's career took a massive hit. But for me, it was a bittersweet victory. I had exposed them, but at the cost of my own marriage and the life I thought I had. As I watched Daniel's life unravel, I felt a sense of closure. It was a harsh lesson, but one that freed me from the chains of a loveless marriage. I was ready to move on, to rebuild my life on my terms. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I watched as Daniel's meticulously constructed world fell apart. The man who once held himself with unshakable confidence was now a shadow of his former self, reeling from the impact of his own actions. The final blow came during a tense meeting at our lawyer's office to discuss the divorce proceedings. Daniel, looking defeated, tried to salvage what little he could from the ruins of his life. "Look, Laura, can't we sort this out amicably? Think about what you're doing here. This will ruin both our lives," Daniel pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and revulsion. "Amicable? After what you did? You didn't think of our lives when you were with Isabel. It's too late for regrets, Daniel." Our lawyer, a stoic man, handed Daniel the divorce papers. "The terms are clear. Given the circumstances, there will be no alimony. You'll also need to agree on the division of assets." Daniel's face contorted in anger. "This is ridiculous. I earned most of this. She doesn't deserve half of my assets." I remained calm, my resolve unshaken. "I don't want your money, Daniel. I want my freedom. And you can keep your assets. I'm starting anew, far from the shadow of your deceit." The divorce was finalized swiftly. Daniel's career continued to spiral downward as the scandal became public knowledge. Isabel, on the other hand, faced her own set of consequences. Her marriage to James ended in a bitter divorce, and she was left to grapple with the social and professional fallout of her actions. As for me, I emerged from the chaos with a sense of liberation. I had lost my marriage, but I gained something far more valuable, my self-respect and independence. I sold the house, a place that once symbolized our shared dreams, and moved into a modest apartment, embracing my new beginning. My days were no longer filled with the dread of Daniel's return or the anguish of his betrayal. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, rediscovering my passions, and reconnecting with old friends. The experience had changed me, but it also strengthened me. I realized that life often throws unexpected challenges our way, and how we respond to them defines us. I chose to stand up for myself, to fight back against betrayal and deceit, and in doing so, I found a resilience I never knew I had.